Ukrainian defense forces have liberated the village from Russian occupiers, the village of Kosivtsevo in the Zaporizhia region. The operation was carried out by soldiers of the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment of the Ukrainian Ground Forces. After the assault, the troops cleared the area, checking houses, basements, and shelters to make sure no occupiers remained. Kosivtsevo is now fully under the control of Ukrainian forces. Since the beginning of the day, the Russian army has tried to break through Ukrainian defenses 47 times, in 8 different directions. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the defense forces repelled 18 Russian attacks in the Pokrovsk direction. Ukrainian soldiers also stopped another 10 enemy assaults in the Huliaipol sector of the front. The occupying forces have also intensified their attacks in Myrnohrad, Donetsk region.
Today, the infantry component is the main argument of the Russian army, along with the aviation component. That is, carrying out bombing strikes on our positions and fortifications. For our units, these are the 2 main threats. This is what Russia has on the battlefield today. It's clear that the grouping of Russian troops concentrated around the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd agglomeration now numbers about 150,000 personnel. The enemy is suffering very heavy losses, so replenishing manpower in this sector of the front is currently the top priority for the Russian occupiers.
In the Polish and Alexandrovsk directions, Russian commanders have pulled in troops and are trying to advance. But Ukrainian defenders are holding back the pressure and eliminating the invaders who are trying to slip into the rear of the armed forces of Ukraine. This was reported by Vladislav Voloshin, spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces. The enemy's advance is being held back not only by Ukrainian assault troops, but also by communication problems among the Russians after Starlinks were cut off for the Russian army. At the same time, analysts say that new maneuvering opportunities have opened up for the Ukrainian armed forces.
The significant wave of intense outcry that Z-bloggers are now raising there is also very much directly connected to the fact that the overall level of communication has dropped significantly. This essentially means the enemy's command system is functioning much less effectively than before, and that's directly linked to the overall effectiveness of their tactical combat operations. That's why here we see the significant positive developments for Ukraine's defense forces are directly attributed to their strategic use of Starlink. The enemy is currently trying to counteract this disadvantageous situation at the strategic level, even going so far as to have Putin or other top military political leaders try to talk to Elon Musk personally to influence a change in the current situation.
Analysts are pointing out that Russia is running out of the funds needed to keep financing its war machine. Tankers from Russia's Shadow Fleet are being seized not only by the U.S., but now also by India, and revenues from the key oil sector have dropped 5-fold.
Recruiting people for the war is getting harder and harder in the Russian Federation, despite the large payouts. The number of desertions is increasing, as is the number of people who are trying, let's say, to evade service in various ways. The casualty rate is very high. Accordingly, replacing these losses is becoming more and more difficult. This suggests that sooner or later, the Kremlin will indeed have to enter into constructive negotiations and, among other things, make certain concessions.
Almost 1,200,000. 50,000 soldiers have already been lost by the Russian Federation since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. These are the figures reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who also note that just in the past day, the defense forces eliminated 820 occupiers. 5 tanks, 2 armored combat vehicles, and nearly 60 artillery systems were also destroyed. 1 multiple rocket launcher system and 1 air defense system will no longer appear in the Ukrainian sky, along with more than 1,500 Russian drones. And more than 230 units of enemy vehicles will not return to the battlefield.
For more on what's happening at the front, the hottest areas, and how the dynamics are being observed from our guest's perspective, military observer Denis Popovich is already scheduled to appear on our broadcast. Denis, hello.
Greetings.
A very good morning.
Let's start by discussing the topic of Zaporizhia. Since Russian propaganda has recently, they often repeat the word counteroffensive and try to shift the focus specifically to the south of Ukraine. Could you please tell us what's happening there and what the real situation is?
I comment on what's happening now in the Zaporizhia region with great caution. Yes, indeed, Russian propaganda talks a lot about a counteroffensive, even claiming some breakthroughs. supposedly up to 16 kilometers deep. From our point of view, from our side, from Ukraine's side, I want to repeat once again, it's important to talk about this. We need to be more cautious because apparently it's hardly appropriate to talk about a counteroffensive. Most likely, we're talking about counterattacks in several areas, which have been successful. We've heard about the liberation of a number of settlements in the Zaporizhia region, but to claim that this is a large-scale counteroffensive operation, in my opinion, that would be an exaggeration. I would still keep an eye on how things develop.
Of course, tell me, if we're talking about the hottest spot, obviously it remains Покrovsk, Myrnihard, and Zediver. We're talking about that direction. How do you see, I don't know, the dynamics of how the situation might develop in the near future, specifically in this area?
The trend is that if we look at the same deep state map from January 1st to today, we can see that the red zone is expanding, both in Pokrovsk and in Mirnograd. Gradually, the Russian army is absorbing these settlements. Although overall, the defense of these cities continues. As of today, Ukrainian forces are actively wearing down the Russian army in that sector of the front, which, as we know, has been reinforced with the Pokrovsky-Vinohradske direction, 150 to 170,000 personnel. Out of just over 700,000 who are present on the territory of Ukraine in total. Russian personnel, let's put it that way. Right now, the Russians are mostly trying to operate on the flanks. They're attacking Haishain, attacking Radinske. In other words, these are settlements, let's say, on different sides of this agglomeration. They will go directly into Radinske. And if these settlements are captured, then of course, logistics will become extremely complicated. It's already not easy as it is. It will become as complicated as possible in this direction. Overall, right now, the fighting is taking place in the northern part of Pokrovsk and Bernard.
We're saying that it's become harder for the occupying army to advance since their communications are now somewhat lost, if you can put it that way. Starlinks have been shut off. Now there are whitelists, Starlinks, and there are those used by Putin's army. They're trying to compensate. We've seen the first videos. Occupiers themselves say nothing is working. Is it actually working? And have they restored communications?
No, well, of course the Starlinks won't work.
Officially.
At the SpaceX company level, whitelists are being implemented, Starlinks will be enabled. Moreover, their Telegram is now slowing down, and Telegram played a very important role in their communications. There were private channels there, coordination happened, and so on. Now it's even hard to compare where and in which cases the outcry is louder. Whether it's because of the loss of Starlink or because Telegram is slowing down in the Russian Federation. Because slowing it down means that in the future, this messenger will be stopped altogether. You can't say that communication has been completely lost. Communication is still there. Of course, right now, it's much less responsive and lower quality than it was when Starlink and Telegram were working, but communication still exists. So right now it's at the level of 2022 to 2023, but to claim that there has been a total communication collapse would be quite reckless and very premature. Right now they're deploying satellites, dishes aimed at working with Gazprom's Yamal and Express satellites. Of course, it's nothing like Starlink, but one way or another, it does provide something. They have wired communication, they have radio communication, they have Wi-Fi bridges that they can set up wherever it's technically feasible for them. So they won't be left completely without communication. But also, if we go back to the events in the Zaporizhia region, to those counteroffensive and counterattacking actions we're carrying out in the south, there is a prevailing opinion that we're able to successfully carry these operations out because the Russian Federation lost command and control over its troops after Stalin was disconnected. In other words, they certainly do have a significant problem with controlling their troops because of this. They really do. They have significant difficulties effectively targeting and striking at the Ukrainian army's logistics at extended ranges of 20 kilometers or more. These measures have certainly not come without some very serious consequences for them at all.
They definitely felt the impact. Fears among the Twinkarovs that shutting off Starlink satellite internet would undermine the positions of Russian troops on the front lines have started to come true. Ukrainian forces advanced in the Zaporizhia region, as this publication reports, after Russian units lost their connection provided by Elon Musk's company. And they cite a high-ranking NATO official. Well, that's one way to comment on it.
Now, we're already looking at how this affects certain situations in specific areas. Obviously, any comments about possible counteroffensive actions from the other side. And the armed forces of Ukraine also need to be cautious. But Dennis, I'd like to ask you about how this whole situation with Telegram, the blocking, and accordingly Starlink might affect things, and in what way? The Russian occupying army acts not only along the front line or in the gray zone, but also against peaceful Ukrainian cities, essentially using this type of communication, any they could get their hands on, any that was available to them, to shell Ukrainian cities using those same drones.
When we talk about the rocket attack, yes, right now, today in Kyiv at night.
Yes, not only Kyiv, Naberezhnye Chelny, Pavlograd.
And
Odessa.
yeah, both Odessa and Odessa. They experienced missile strikes today. When we talk, for example, about ballistic missile attacks, what does Starlink have to do with it? So, in no way, the shutdown of Starlink, unfortunately, will not affect the frequency or intensity of missile attacks in any way. When we talk about the specific actions of these long-range drones, you might remember there was a notable case when a drone flew directly over the center of Kyiv. It wasn't detected in time, and the air raid siren only started to sound when it was finally visually spotted, this particular drone hovering over the very center of the capital city. That's what Starlink is about. So Starlink is a broadband connection that is very resilient against jamming systems, against electronic warfare measures. It allows you to control the drone online. It allows you to launch it at very low altitudes, extremely low altitudes, meaning you have sensitive real-time control. And basically, the operator can fly around air defense posts, obstacles, terrain features, and any other barriers that might get in the way of the drone. So that's what Starlink is about. When Starlink disappears completely, yes, this ability to not disappear as well.
Dennis, you know, I'd also like to draw attention to and discuss this topic with you. It's come up in various media outlets and Telegram channels. The Russians are trying, to somehow solve this problem of not having Starlink connectivity, and as I understand it, they're spreading information through the same social networks. And they're even suggesting, perhaps, that Ukrainians somehow help with this. Your thoughts on this? Yes, and in general, not just about this approach, but how Ukrainians should react to it, how they should behave or not behave in response to such things. But I think, based on the results of the latest shelling, one way or another, we need to raise and remind people about the topic of information hygiene. Yes, when we shouldn't be posting, no one should, and that includes Telegram channels, about how, where, and what was hit accordingly.
Yes, today we also had another interesting report. So, for example, which facility at which site a fire broke out, how much of the site was affected, and after that, new missiles were launched at that site. Honestly, I don't know how the person who filmed that video and posted it online feels, especially after labeling it the way they did. This is yet another reminder that you shouldn't be helping to adjust missile strikes with your own hands. Missile launches by the enemy. In the end, you're only making things worse for yourself. As for the story about registering Starlink, the company the enemy is now trying to get through, it's important to remember that such registration in rear cities requires a visit to the CNM, the Center for Administrative Services. That's the registration process for Starlink for civilians. And when you fall for such an offer and show up at the CNAP with such a request, and then it ends up in the enemy's hands, you're basically signing yourself up for a lawsuit right away. That's why you should ignore these kinds of offers and ignore these kinds of traps, pardon my language, and just not do it. It'll only cause problems later. It will create a big headache for anyone who falls for the enemy's offer like that.